I believe, Samantha, you're going to record.
Yes, I just hit record. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you guys for joining our session today. We will wait a few moments just for everyone to join the session. If you're having any difficulty with audio or with any technical difficulties at all, please just send us a message in the chat so that we can get you situated before we begin. We'll wait just a few moments as folks join. And I'll remind the panelists to stay on mute during the time that we're in transition. And then we'll come off of mute during each person's portion. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait another moment or two while folks log on. Hope everyone's doing well today. Looking forward to this session. Thanks for your patience while we get everyone settled. Again, if you have any technical issues, please feel free to mention that in the chat. We have folks here to help you with that if you have any difficulty. Okay, it looks like we're good to go. So welcome and thank you for joining us for the Soft Skills Summit. We're excited to have you in this session today. To begin, I would like to introduce Lisa Call of MEBA. Lisa?
Thanks, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. We are very excited to have you with us today, participating in our Soft Skills Summit with our partner, ATD. We're excited about the opportunity. We did a couple of sessions yesterday. They were very successful, and we've got two sessions today. We have one this afternoon at 2. We have another one tomorrow and Thursday at 11, and 2 more on Wednesday and Thursday at 2. So if you would like to set in for those, please make sure that you pop in at those times. We will be recording this to be able to share with our schools as well. Feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat box. If you're having technical difficulties, make sure that you're adjusting your volume on your computer or on the screen where you may be watching this session. Jessica, I'm going to turn it right back over to you so that you can kick us off.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Cabrera, and I am the past president of the Association for Talent Development in South Carolina. You heard the acronym ATD, and that stands for the Association for Talent Development. For my day job, I serve as the Managing Director of Member Engagement for American Farm Bureau Federation, which is based out of Washington, D.C. I received my undergraduate degree from Clemson University and my graduate degree from Colorado State University. I'm a certified professional in talent development through ATD, and I'm also a student of the Institute for Organization Management through the United States Chamber of Commerce. So I'm a lifelong learner, and it is definitely a great thing to have you participating in your own personal and career development today. My career, ever since high school, I started working when I was 15 years old, and I have not stopped working since then. And my career, ever since high school, has been a journey with many twists and turns. And resilience has been an important skill for me as I have faced many challenges on my journey in my life and in my career. So I do believe that this session is very relevant, and I hope that you will enjoy it. The session is entitled Resilience, Are You Quake-Proof? The speaker for the session is Kevin Wright. So Kevin Wright has served as the Director of Organizational Learning at McLeod Health since 2012. He brings with him 20 years of experience in training and development. At McLeod, Kevin is responsible for the oversight of corporate training, which includes new employee orientation, nursing orientation, clinical practice development, leadership development, and McLeod University. Kevin loves to teach. He's a certified professional in talent development, just like me, and that's through ATD, and he's a certified Crucial Conversations Master Trainer and a certified Myers-Briggs practitioner through the Myers-Briggs Foundation. Lastly, he is a senior certified professional through the Society for Human Resource Management, which is known as SHRM. So as you can tell, Kevin is also a lifelong learner like me and hopefully like you, where he is constantly educating himself and improving through different coursework and certifications, even as a seasoned adult professional. So during the presentation, there are a few things. We'd like to ask everyone to please stay muted. Also, if you will find the chat box in the Zoom webinar, that will be a way for you to send in questions in the chat during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, the presenter will be available for a live Q&A. So Kevin is here with us right now and will be doing a Q&A with you afterwards. I know that some of you may not be sitting at a computer, but maybe observing this in a larger room. So if you have questions, maybe raise your hand or engage a teacher to be able to submit your question into the chat. Also, at the end, if you have questions, you can present those questions by coming off of mute, and you or your teacher could ask the question by coming off of mute at the end. At the very beginning of this presentation, Kevin's going to tell you about why this topic is important, and then he's going to break down 5 building blocks for resilience. And this is something that if you pay attention to it, I think that you will find that this is something you can apply in your life. If you have the ability, I encourage you to take notes. If you are, have the ability to write something down where you are, if a teacher has not already given you an assignment to do during this time, I encourage you to take notes. If you don't have paper, but you have a device or something, maybe you can take notes there. But it's really, I want you to be able to walk away with these 5 building blocks for resilience so that this is something you can take with you and you can apply in your own life as you grow in discovering your career and your path along the way. So without further ado, we will begin the presentation. Resilience, are you quake-proof?
Good morning. My name is Kevin Wright, and I am the Director of Organizational Learning for McLeod Health here in Florence, South Carolina. And I am happy to be with you today to talk about resilience. And what's interesting for me about that topic is we chose resilience as our annual training topic, which is a training program that we make available for all of our employees, about 9,000 employees here at McLeod Health. And we chose that topic at the end of 2019, going into 2020, before the pandemic even started. And who knew what was coming last year? We had no idea, but it was just irony, I guess, that we chose that topic and couldn't have been more relevant and impactful for our employees as we experienced 2020 and all that it had to offer. So if you think back, for everything that we've experienced in the last 9 to 10 months, or maybe even longer than that, we've gone through a lot of change. We've changed the way we go to school. We've changed the way that we work. We've changed the way that we live our lives in general. And resilience plays a part in our ability to get through last year and to move into this year and hopefully experience some better things. So there's a famous quote from Heraclitus, and I hope I'm not butchering his name too badly, that says that the only constant in life is change. And that couldn't be more true based on what we experienced last year. So change is inevitable, it's unavoidable, but it's how we choose to respond to change that really makes all the difference. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to define resilience, define what it means to have resilience. Then we're going to discuss 5 foundational building blocks of resilience. And then finally, we're going to look at how to develop some in-the-moment coping strategies for those times when our emotions might get the best of us. So what I want you to do first is think about what comes to mind when you hear the word resilience. So it might be an image like this, a person crawling on her knees and elbows, an inch at a time through muddy terrain. Or maybe resilience brings to mind a boxer deciding to get up off the mat and go one more round. Or maybe a picture of a football player allowing himself to get picked up off the field after getting tackled for just one more play. Or lastly, maybe a student staying up until 3 a.m. to finish a project that is due the next day. Maybe you've even been that student. So these are all common ways that the concept of resilience can be seen in our everyday lives. And the interesting thing about resilience is that we often believe that the longer we tough it out, the tougher we are, the more grit we have, the more we persevere, that the more successful and happy we will be. And that's not always the case, as we're going to learn throughout this presentation today. So to get started, we need to work on developing a strong foundation of resilience. And what do I mean by a strong foundation? So if we were talking about construction, I'd be referring to a strong, solid, concrete foundation. You have to start with that if you're building a house. If we were talking about your health, a strong foundation would include building a strong core, improving your flexibility, stretching, having good posture, things like that. In reference to your wealth, a strong foundation would include a good income, maybe having a financial plan, savings, budgeting, etc. For your career, a strong foundation would include education, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And then for relationships, just as another reference point, a strong foundation would include things like time, commitment, energy, love, communication. And then the question brings, how do we build a strong foundation of resilience? I think all those other areas of your life, those things make sense. but you might struggle with some ideas around building a strong foundation of resilience. So first we have to define resilience in the context of this presentation today. So resilience is the process of bouncing back after adversity. It is a person's capacity to respond to the pressures and demands of daily life. So typically when we're talking about resilience, words like flexibility, durability, strength, speed of recovery, and toughness are included in the conversation. So when we're able to practice resilience, it helps us better manage stress in a positive way. And it actually has many health benefits, such as longevity, lower rates of depression, and it leads to an overall greater satisfaction with life. In healthcare, which again is the industry that I work in, it is necessary to obtain a level of resilience in order to stay in a helping profession for any length of time. And that's something that we teach our nurses, our doctors, and our other providers, is that you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others over the long term. And we always use the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. So again, it's almost like that airline analogy where when the oxygen mask falls down, you put your oxygen mask on first before you can help other people. So the same applies when it comes to resilience. So resilience is not just a passive quality, but it's an active process. So how we approach life and everything that it can throw at us, as it has for the last year, has a massive impact on our experiences. Having resilience doesn't mean you can prevent adversity, but that you can bounce back from difficult circumstances and experiences. And the good news is that resilience is not extraordinary or unattainable. Everyone can learn how to build resilience. So I'm not an architect by any means, but I'm going to refer back to our analogy of being quake-proof that I used in the opening. So science and technology have made great strides in developing designs for earthquake-proof buildings. A structure will have much greater chance of withstanding an earthquake if it is built with firm pillars set deep in the ground and then allowed to flex and sway with the shaking of an earthquake. So you see that illustrated there on the slide. So firm and flexible are the two keys that are mentioned in that last statement. So we're going to look at where you want to be firm and how you want to be flexible when faced with events that might shake you. So these are the 5 foundational blocks that we're going to talk about in regards to building resilience. So in the area of firm, we want to build self-esteem. We want to make and maintain connections. We want to set goals. And then around the area of being flexible, we want to look at accepting and embracing change, using flexible thinking. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to finish up with some in-the-moment coping strategies for building resilience. The first foundational building block is having strong self-esteem. And I'm sure you know the next foundational building block is making and maintaining connections. So the first building block, we talked about strengthening your sense of self. And then this one is about strengthening your relationships with others. So people who have strong relationships and strong connections in life tend to be more resilient. So first you have to identify your support network. This could already exist, or you may need to actively work to increase your network. So think about who you would reach out to if you needed support. Can you identify any gaps there? Building and maintaining relationships is a two-way street. You need to give as well as receive. When you have a support network firmly in place, it forms a foundation that you can count on for advice and support when you're facing adversity.
I apologize for the technical interruption. Let's make sure you get the right building block in the right order.
The first foundational building block is having strong self-esteem. And I'm sure you know, self-esteem is having confidence in one's own worth or abilities, also known as having self-respect. So self-esteem is important to resilience because having resilience depends in part on having confidence in your own abilities in the face of obstacles and uncertainty. So we're not talking about cockiness or arrogance here, but confidence. Cockiness can sometimes relate to rigidity because in your mind you know that you know everything and you have all the answers. So that's not what we're talking about in regards to having self-confidence. But you do believe the voices in your head, and we do all have voices in our head. If you're constantly bombarding yourself with negative judgments, it will chip away at your self-esteem and have long-term impacts on how you feel about yourself. So pay attention to what you're telling yourself. If you say it long enough, you start to believe it. And I really believe that that's true. And as I mentioned, we do all have voices in our heads, sometimes more than others. And if your voices are negative, it's going to be more difficult for you to build and maintain your self-confidence and your self-esteem. So 3 of the most common negative voices that we hear are the critic, the worrier, and the victim. And we're going to talk briefly about each of those and give you some insight into that. So the critic is someone who is constantly judging and evaluating themselves. It's pointing out flaws and limitations. And you know, you've heard people say that sometimes we can be our own worst critic. And I think that is certainly true. So the critic often sounds like this, things that you might say to yourself. I'm a failure. I can't do anything right. I'm not good enough, or I'll never get better at this. So those are all examples of something the critic might say to themselves. The worrier, on the other hand, expects the worst all the time. They exaggerate the consequences of that worst case scenario. They're always playing that out. And the worrier's favorite expression is, what if? So it might sound like the following examples. Oh no, my heart is beating faster. What if I panic and completely lose control? What if I'm alone and there is no one around to help me out? Or what if I do something that is really embarrassing? So again, always playing that worry card about what might happen. What if this happens, and playing out that worst case scenario. And then lastly, the victim is someone who focuses on feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. They perceive insurmountable obstacles in achieving their goals. So the victim's favorite expression is, I can't and I never will be able to. I've had this problem too long and I will never get any better. I've tried everything and nothing ever seems to work. So I love this quote from Dr. Brene Brown. We have to remember to talk to ourselves like we would someone we love. And that really can make a huge difference. So just on a side note, if you've never read any of Dr. Brown's work, I encourage you to check out some of her books. The Gifts of Imperfection, which is all about being you. Daring Greatly, which is a book about being all in. Rising Strong is a book about falling, getting up, and trying again. And then the last book of hers that I read was a book called Braving the Wilderness. And it's a book about belonging in this world and in this culture. So again, just a side note there for some great reads if you haven't had a chance to check out Dr. Brene Brown's work. And then lastly, how do we stop negative self-talk? How do we stop being the critic, our own worst critic? How do we stop being the worrier? And these are some strategies that I'm going to give you. It's called the SOS method. The S is for stop. Mentally tell yourself to stop. Catch yourself in that moment of self-talk, self-doubt, and give yourself the opportunity to address the thought and interrupt that cycle. And then the O in SOS is for observe. And in this step, you want to observe what you are saying to yourself and how it's making you feel, because that's a big way. How that makes you feel is going to determine how you act or how you respond in that moment. And then lastly, the last S is to shift your cognitive, emotional, or behavioral response by using positive coping skills and techniques. So again, it's really important to be able to recognize when you're doing that self-talk or that creating that self-doubt. Catch yourself in that moment and use that SOS to shift out of that mentality into a more positive state. The next foundational building block is making and maintaining connections. So the first building block, we talked about strengthening your sense of self, and then this one is about strengthening your relationships with others. So people who have strong relationships and strong connections in life tend to be more resilient. So first you have to identify your support network. This could already exist, or you may need to actively work to increase your network. So think about who you would reach out to if you needed support. Can you identify any gaps there? Building and maintaining relationships is a two-way street. You need to give as well as receive. When you have a support network firmly in place, it forms a foundation that you can count on for advice and support when you're facing adversity. So to help build your support network, here's some techniques you can use. Number one, take a proactive approach by reaching out to others. And again, don't wait for them to reach out to you. Be proactive. Reach out to them in advance in support of a time where you might need that. The more you reach out, the more likely you are to find genuine connections with others. Number two, offer your help. It feels good to help other people, and it will strengthen your connection with that person or with those people. And number three, stay in touch. Don't only reach out when you need help or need support or need advice on something. Make an effort to stay in contact with them. And then, because that will take some effort, but it is worth it in the long run. And then the last part of this foundational block is about strengthening your connections. You've all heard the saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The weak link is when we start experiencing those negative voices in our heads that create that self-doubt and that we talked about before, and it makes us question our abilities. So the best way to strengthen our connections is by being a good listener. It's not by talking. So I always say that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we should do more listening than we do talking. We can connect through listening by using these strategies. Number one, let the other person do most of the talking. Number two, pay attention to body language, making sure that the person's body language is matching the words that are coming out of their mouth. And then number three, be curious about the other person. Ask questions, which will show genuine interest in the person and in the conversation that you're having. The third foundational building block is setting and achieving our goals. Building resilience includes setting realistic goals and then taking the necessary steps to carry them out. This increases our resilience because goals provide purpose and direction, commitment, and motivation. It enables us to stay true to our purpose no matter what is going on around us. So most of you may already be familiar with SMART goals, and it is a useful acronym for structuring this process of goal setting. So the S is for specific, be clear and detailed about what you want to achieve. This will help structure the goal and make sure that you're on target for achieving it. Make sure that the goal is measurable. So your goal must have criteria that can be measured to determine if you achieved it. So if your goal is to lose 10 pounds, then you can, when you've hit that 10-pound mark, then you know that you've hit that goal. If your goal is to run a mile, and once you've accomplished that, it's measurable in that you can say, this is the metric that I've set, and this is the metric that I've achieved. Your goal must be attainable. You must believe that you can achieve your goal. Otherwise, it's just a wish. It's not a goal. Your goal should be relevant. It must have some meaningful application to your life, whether it be personally or professionally. And then lastly, the goal should be time-based. Every goal should have a deadline. It can't be something that you want to achieve at some point in your life, but set a realistic time frame on when that goal can be achieved, and that'll help you hit that mark, especially if you're using milestone deadlines along the way. So going back to your goal of losing 10 pounds, if you want to lose a pound every month over the next 10 months, that might be a way of setting that. So you can hit some milestones along the way and mark your progress. And then lastly, achieving your goals is all about incorporating them into your daily life and into your task. So most importantly, you can break them down into manageable steps. As you finish each step, you'll have a sense of accomplishment and gain momentum towards your ultimate goal. So some quick tips on achieving goals. Number one, write your goals down and post them where you can see them. On the refrigerator, on the dash of your car, on your desk, wherever you're going to see it on a regular basis. And it can be a constant reminder of what you're trying to accomplish. Number two, break your larger goal down into smaller steps, like I mentioned, so that it doesn't, you've heard the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So if you can break the big overall goal down into smaller goals, then it'll make it seem that much more achievable. Number three, monitor your progress. Maybe a daily log or a weekly check in on how your goal accomplishment is moving, how you're moving towards that goal, so that you have that record of a regular check-in. Number four, enlist a buddy or an accountability partner. This can really go a long way towards helping you stay on track, helping you stay motivated. It's having someone that can give you that encouragement, that motivation that you might need to keep moving towards that goal. And then number five is committing yourself completely to your goal. If you're not completely committed, if you're only partially committed to the goal, then you might achieve partial results. So just, again, it's more of a mental thing, but just fully committing to what it is that you're trying to accomplish can go a long way towards goal achievement. So far, we've looked at some strategies to help us stay strong in the face of adversity. Now let's look at some strategies for being flexible, for bending and not breaking during the quake. So the fourth foundational block is accepting and embracing change. Change is difficult for many people because they equate change with loss. It makes them feel helpless and not in control. So becoming more resilient means changing your mindset toward change and seeing the positive opportunities that it holds. The change cycle consists of 4 stages, similar to the 4 stages of grief that you may be familiar with. And remember, change equals loss for some people. Stage 1 is denial. People are often shocked or surprised when change occurs. Even if they suspected it was coming, information and lots of it is critical at this stage. Stage 2 is anger. This is the stage where you are most likely to resist change, actively or passively. Support is critical at this stage. Stage 3 is bargaining. When it becomes apparent that change is not going away, people find a way to cope with it. Training and time to experience the change is important at this stage. Stage 4 is acceptance. At this point, change becomes second nature. Celebrate success at this stage. And generally speaking, resilient people are able to move quickly through the 4 stages and reach stage 4 more quickly and easily. Resisting change is unproductive in terms of increasing your resilience. If you're unsure whether or not you tend to resist, listen to the following statements. If you've ever heard yourself say any of these, then you've probably been stuck in resistance at some point. Number one, we've never done it this way before. 2, others have always tried that or already tried that. Number 3, it needs to be studied first. And number 4, you could be right, but what if you're not? So again, those are just some examples of resistance. So people have different responses to change. Proactively adapting to change will mean different things to different people. So just like the goldfish on the screen there, sometimes we need to take a leap and lead the change we want to see. It's helpful for everyone to identify the consequences of not changing. This can help you gain a realistic perspective and see the benefits of making the change. So in closing for this foundation, figure out what you can and cannot control. For the things you can control, make a plan to implement the change. For the things you cannot control, find a way to make peace with what is happening to you or around you. The fifth and final foundational building block is using flexible thinking to overcome obstacles. Here we're talking about our ability to shift our thoughts in order to respond effectively to any given situation that shakes or sways us. That is what builds resilience. So think of the flexibility and strength you gain from doing yoga. You can develop the same flexibility and strength mentally with practice. Here are a few tips. I'm going to keep this short just for the sake of time. So investigate the boundaries. What are the boundaries with which the solution must fit into? Are the boundaries your own perceptions or are they reality? What are the possibilities if you push the boundaries? What are the benefits of small boundary changes? Remember too that hard work is not always the solution. Repeating the same wrong process again and again with more vigor does not work. It's not always about perseverance. It's not always about putting in that extra effort and pushing yourself to the breaking point. You can be very close to a solution while not getting any closer to it. So thought is the solution. Physical hard work will not always be the answer. And then how can you think differently about the situation that you're in? Can you imagine the problem from someone else's view? What happens in other countries, cultures, or situations? How can you change the situation to make a solution work? And try to understand why other people think the way they do. So simply seeing the issue or the situation from someone else's perspective can sometimes help you see things in the right way. So last but not least, in closing, just some in-the-moment coping strategies that you can use to build resistance. And this will help you in dealing with situations right in that moment, right when it's happening. So you see some great options there on the screen, on the slide, and I'll just focus on a couple as we wrap this up. So allow yourself to have a bad day. Accept it and know that tomorrow will be better. Go find a private place to cry, yell, maybe quietly, punch the air, sit still, take a deep breath, whatever will help you cope and regain your composure. A private place can often be the bathroom, could be outside, maybe an empty classroom, or anywhere where you won't be disturbed for a few minutes. Try to lighten your load. Figure out what tasks or activities you must do, and then which ones you should do, but you can let go at this temporary moment of crisis. It's also important to ask a friend for help or for moral support. Find someone, a colleague, a coworker, another student, and talk to them. In most cases, just sharing your feelings helps you feel better about what's happening. And then some other strategies: avoid things or people that will only make you feel worse in that moment. Help someone else. As we talked before about helping someone can make you feel better about what's going on around you. Start your day over if you can. Smile. And then last but not least, find something to be thankful for. So I hope that this presentation has been helpful in helping you determine some ways that you can build resilience in your life. I hope that you've taken some nuggets of information in the areas of building self-esteem, making and maintaining connections, setting goals, accepting and embracing change, and then using flexible thinking to change your mindset. And then I also hope that some of those in the moment coping strategies will help you in that moment when you need it most, when you need that resilience to persevere, to overcome, and to bounce back from an obstacle that you're facing. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Man, that presentation was full of incredibly valuable content. And I know that I said at the beginning to take notes, but I also think that it would be easy to go back and watch this presentation again in the future and break it down for even more meaningful discussion after today. So maybe there are some classes or teachers or individuals who might be interested in doing that. We hope that you can use this resource. So now we get to open up our Q&A with Kevin. And if you have any questions that you would like to either speak out loud about or put in the chat, feel free to just send us a message. Let us know that you would either like for us to have you come off of mute to speak, or if you'd like to include your message in the chat, we can take it then. And then if you know, Kevin and I have a few other things that we can talk about to share with you for our final moments here today as well. So the first question, Kevin, that we have come in is, do you have any suggestions for getting better at time management?
That is a great question. And I think that plays right into the topic of resilience, because I have found personally that what takes up your time kind of drives who you are as an individual, and allows you to accomplish what it is, whether or not you get to accomplish what it is that you're wanting to do during the day. So I use a calendar. I think for me, that helps, me manage things during the day, helps me kind of maintain control over what I think is important in my life. And instead of letting things happen to me, I try to be more in control. So I think using a calendar, so for example, one that I use through our email system at work, helps me manage both my, my professional day and my personal day. So I would say the biggest thing that I would add would be find a calendar tool that works for you, whether it be something on your phone or on your computer, and just take control of your time is the biggest thing.
Yeah, great point. I have a similar situation. I think it seems like the busier you get, the more time management is critically important. But even for those of you out there who might be prone to procrastinate, I know that we are not alone in the world. There are a lot of us, and I'm one of them. And the reason why I tend to procrastinate is because I work well under pressure. So I'm the kind of person that when I feel the pressure, that's when I perform really well. But yet when I don't feel the pressure, I tend to be slower and I'm not as sharp, I guess. So I've had to learn as an adult and as a busy professional mom and all of those things, that I can actually create my pressure through my own time management. So something may not be due today, but if I'm managing my time in a way that I put it on my schedule to be due today, then I feel the pressure to get it done. And that's a way that I'm able to utilize time management and scheduling myself to still perform at a high level, but not always push myself to the last minute to get things done. So, and if you aren't the kind of person to use a device, a lot of students in the room may not be accustomed to using calendars on their phones yet or whatnot, then even just keeping a list, taking notes on a phone or on a sticky note is a great way to just identify what you need to do on each given day and begin like that. And as you progress, you'll start to use calendars and other tools and resources to help manage your time. All right, let's see. I'm gonna take a look back at the chat again to see if anybody else has any questions. And while we wait to see if anybody has any questions, there's one thing that I wanted to bring up that I thought about a lot during your presentation, and that is when you're transitioning in life. So for example, students that are going to be with us today are going through transitions very frequently. At this age, things are changing every 3 to 6 months for them. And they're also imagining big life transitions on the horizon, you know, maybe choosing what path they want to be on academically or career-wise, choosing if they want to do college or university after high school, choosing what kind of degree program or career path they'd like to take. And these are big decisions because, you know, it kind of defines a little bit of who you are whenever you're making these decisions or what your path looks like. And I find in my own personal story that resilience was something that I had to build during transitional times in my life when I was making that decision about going to college, or making the decision. I ended up studying in another country when I was in college. And so making the decision to leave and to go to another country was really hard. And it made me feel defeated sometimes just to not know the answers to the questions. So do you have anything from your presentation today and that great content that you would apply to that kind of situation where you're trying to make decisions that are gonna really, I'm not gonna say dictate your course because everything's always flexible. I mean, you can make one decision one day and change course, you know, a couple months later, you can decide to change course to a different direction if you need to. But, you know, just how you would apply these concepts to going through transitions and making decisions, life decisions.
Yeah, I think it ties in nicely to the goal setting aspect of it. I think we should challenge ourselves to reach for the stars and go for things that we want to accomplish in our life, knowing that it might not always work out exactly as we have planned. So I think it ties back into that accepting and embracing change. We might be on a track to, you know, get this degree or attend this school or do this in our life, but there may be different plans in store for us. So just being able to accept that and being able to embrace that change that we're faced with. So for example, my very first job out of college was with American Express. And I had been with them over 10 years when they decided to basically do away with our whole training department. And so I found myself at that point in my career thinking I was going to be with this company for 30 years. I mean, that's the way old people like us used to think. And then suddenly I was faced with, I've got to find a new job, a different career, and I hadn't planned it or prepared for that. So, and I think that's when that whole being our worst critic can sometimes play against us. We think back on what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And I try to take too much responsibility for the situation that I found myself in. But sometimes we have to take challenges or obstacles like that and learn from it and use it as an opportunity to move forward in our life in a direction that maybe we hadn't planned. So just that whole being open and accepting and just knowing that change is going to come, whether we're ready for it or not.
Gosh, that is so true. I can think of scenarios in my life as well, and I'll just share with the group. One example is that I ended up getting my undergraduate degree from Clemson University. But when I was in high school, Clemson was the last place that I wanted to go to school. I had some family members that wanted me to go to that school, and at that stage of my life, I didn't want to do what they wanted me to do. I wanted to do my own thing. And I ended up visiting a friend at Clemson University, and not related to searching for a university, but just because I was invited and she said, come for the weekend. And I did. Well, I fell in love with the school and the campus and the culture. And I realized this is where I wanted to be. And I had to let my own pride I had to let go of my pride of wanting to be my own person and not do what other people wanted me to do, and realize this is the right thing for me. And fast forward to the end of my time at Clemson, I swore up and down I would not be a teacher. People asked me, are you going to teach? And I said over and over again, no, there is no way I would be a teacher. And I ended up in a class that required me to be to do some observations in a high school. And I went in, and long story short is that I was really good at it, and I loved it, and I really enjoyed it. And so all of a sudden I found myself wondering, should I teach? And it was hard because you're taking what is the world, what are the people around you expecting of you? What is it that you want for yourself? What does your next step in life look like? What does your income look like? Things like that. And but I ended up making the decision to go back to school, become certified as a secondary teacher. I was a high school teacher as my first job in my career. And who would have known that would have ended up leading me into doing professional development, which led me to get my graduate degree. And my whole kind of path was forged off of that. But teaching was not something I wanted to do, and it was not what I envisioned for my future, but it ended up becoming a really important part of my journey. So I think that, like you said, being flexible, being open, recognizing that things do change often. And especially, the past 12 months throughout COVID have taught all of us, we don't know what's going to happen next month. Are we going to be in virtual school? Are we going to be in face-to-face school? Are we going to be hybrid? What's the government going to do? Are we going to be able to get our hair cut? Are we going to be shut in? There's so many questions during COVID, and being open and flexible and agile is just so important. So you bring up a really good point there. So let's see, we had a comment in here about COVID, actually, that school schedules and virtual and in-person changes are kind of happening overnight. So we're all having to figure out how to deal with that. So thanks for sharing that comment there. Why don't we talk, it's on a very similar topic, but what about this idea that you mentioned towards the end of control? What are the things that you can control, and what are the things that you can't control? What advice would you give to students who really want to have great things happen in their life? They want to, they want to find that job that they love and enjoy. They want to have the income that is going to support them. They want to be able to provide for themselves or to embrace a career in the future. What would you say to those students about that balance between the things that you can control and the things that you cannot control?
That's a great question. I would say just maintain your expectations. Like I said before, shoot for the moon. One of my favorite quotes: "Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars." So you guys that are young, you have great opportunity, and the world is yours. Go out there and and do whatever it is that you think you want to do. But put yourself around the right people to learn about, because there might be something you want to do that you think you have interest in. So for example, I work in healthcare, as I've mentioned before. There are a lot of people that go to school to be a nurse, and the very first time they go work in a hospital, maybe to do their rotations or whatever, to actually experience time in a hospital, they figure out really quickly that's not what they want to do once they figure out what that's all about. So try to learn more about what it is that you want to do. So if you're thinking about a particular career, find someone that's working in that field or in that industry and spend some time with them, talk to them, learn more about what they're doing. Putting yourself around the right people so that you can learn will help you go a long way towards figuring out what you actually want to do. So if you want to be, let's say you want to get into real estate, find a local realtor, maybe a family friend or someone that you know that works in that field, and spend some time talking to them and learning from them. And just having those kinds of conversations will help you figure out if that's a direction that you'd like to go. So I think I call it the proximity principle. Put yourself around the kind of people who are doing what you want to do, and so that way you can learn more about it and figure out if it's something that really does interest you.
Wow, that's great, because that's a great example of something that you can control, right? You can control that. You can control reaching out and exploring opportunities, and maybe not only thinking about a job where you can make a certain wage per hour, but also thinking about maybe an internship or shadowing opportunity where you're not getting paid, but it's an investment for the long term. And you're investing in learning now so that you can have a long-term better outcome. And those are the types of things that we can control. Whereas other things like COVID or maybe financial constraints, or maybe the way that timing works out on something, those things we might not be able to control. We just kind of have to roll with the punches whenever those things come along. But the things that we can control is, especially in your example there, really makes a big difference. So I think we are about to wrap it up, but before we do, I'd like to ask one final question, and that is just about your own personal experience. Clearly, you are very well versed on this topic, and I know that you guys have used this a lot in your place of employment in order to train up your staff in the topic of resilience. But what about you personally? Do you have a personal example of a time in your life or your career where you really felt like resilience was a skill that you really needed at that time in order to get through the moment?
I think you mentioned in my bio that I've been working for a few more years than I'd like to admit. But I've found myself at different times in my career challenged to be satisfied or to be happy with where I am and what I'm doing in that particular role or with that particular company. And I think resilience there are things that you can do that I kind of talked about through the presentation to prepare yourself for those kind of moments and those times. And really self-care and then education, knowledge, learning, like you've been talking about so far, Jessica. I think those are important because education and learning and training that you can make available for yourself will help you through those times and give you other opportunities to pursue other areas and other roles if you have the training and the skills to do those things. So I think taking care of yourself first and foremost. So if it's working out to keep your mind and your body in good working condition, if it's reading to keep your mind sharp, just kind of taking care of yourself for those times when life throws you a curveball, will help you be prepared for, and has worked for me over the years during some personal challenges that I've had and professional challenges as well. So taking care of yourself and being that lifelong learner that you referenced back at the beginning.
Excellent tip, and excellent, just sharing that that's been important to you. I share that. I start my days with quiet time And I have a list of things that I'm interested in reading, or exercises that I'm interested in doing, from like professional learning exercises. And I force myself every single day to walk for 20 minutes so that I don't sit behind my computer, and I can just get my blood flowing and my brain operating. And these are all things that I've had to learn to do, because otherwise I won't take care of myself. But I agree. I think that that is so important, and you bring up such a good point with that. So for everyone out there, remember to take really good care of yourself. Remember that when you're in decision-making process, and when you are in transition or trying to figure out what your next step is or what your next decision is, to expose yourself to opportunities, learn as much as you can in the process, and be open and flexible along the way, to understand that things can change, and that you, if you roll with that, you never know where it may lead you next. In addition, remember that there are certain things that we control and certain things that we don't control. So focus on those things that you do have control over, and let go of those things that you don't have control over that can sometimes haunt you at the end of the day. Just let those things go and really focus on how you can take control of certain aspects of your life, your career, your education, in order to position yourself for success. This presentation has been full of a ton of other tips in addition to those that I just mentioned now. So hopefully you can even go back and use this at a later time. But thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for volunteering your time for this effort. Thanks to all of the participants for being with us today. And thank you to Midlands Education Business Alliance, MEBA, for making it possible, along with the Association for Talent Development. We really appreciate everyone, and we hope that you all have a wonderful day.